Good morning, guys. It is 6:45 on a Monday. Now, this video is going to be all about bulking. So I'm going to take you through all my food, all my training, the whats and whys, and then the last section of this video is going to be a mini lecture where I take you through all the important considerations that you need to be making when bulking, as well as some cool strategies that you can use to optimize your muscle gain diet. So this morning for me, I always spend the first couple of hours of my day working behind the laptop. Monday is always quite a busy day for client check-ins. Everyone likes to check in on a Monday, so I'm gonna get to that. And then I'll see you in the next clip for the pre-workout Protein special recipe, which has been highly requested. I'll catch you in the next one. Righty, first bunch of work is complete. It is 8:45, 8:45. And I've got my first meal going down. It is the pre-workout meal as well. So going to take you through how I make my God tier proteins, because everyone's been asking. So this is what you'll need. So we got 100 grams of quick oats here. This is my protein that I'm using, but it's just the Bulk Nutrients protein matrix. This flavor is choc mint. I just don't like fucking putting my hand in the bag and getting shit on it every time. Then need some egg whites. This is one of the secret weapons. You probably think, why the fuck did you need that? But very important. Some stevia, extra sweetness, some salt for those illegal pumps in the gym, and then a bit of peanut butter for fats to help slow digestion as well. So first thing we need to do is get some water. So it doesn't need to be super specific, but you just want enough where all the oats are covered. Like that. That's what it should sort of look like. So maybe like half a cm of water above that, above the oats. Then chuck it in the microwave for 3 minutes. Just keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't overflow. It shouldn't if you've done your water right, but sometimes it can, and that will really fuck up your microwave. I've done that a few times on prep, and it is honestly heartbreaking. So this is sort of what it will look like now. You see it's pretty cooked. Fuck, it's hot. Next step is to add the egg whites. You got to weigh this bit, otherwise you'll majorly screw it up. So adding 100 grams of this. We're gonna add 50 grams of protein, of the protein matrix. Then 2 packets of stevia. I'll just sweeten it up a little bit. And then I do 5 pints of salt. So this is what we're working with. I use a fork to mix it. It's way better than a spoon. It should turn to like a cake batter consistency, or pretty close to. You can see it's starting to fluff up a bit with the egg whites. So you can see it's still a little bit watery. So what we do is chuck it in the microwave. Tastes bomb. For 1 more minute. So just 1 minute, and that'll allow everything to cook through. So here we have the finished product. This is the consistency it should look like, basically like a cake, really. Got my 25 grams of peanut butter in there too. So a way to know if you've done it right is if your proteins survive the flip test. So turn it over. If it doesn't drop, you know you've done it right. So I'm gonna get this down. It's roughly an hour before training, so giving it a decent amount of time to digest, and I'll catch you in the next clip. Alrighty, currently sitting at the gym. The weather absolutely sucks. I don't know if you can see that. It's raining, and we're like mid-November, so I don't know what the story is. Today's workout is going to be arms. Last week was a deload, so back to slightly lower set volumes than we were throwing around the week prior to the deload. We've also, and when I say we, me and Gavin, my training partner, we've decided to go with a slightly different setup for this next block of training. So for our priority muscle groups, which are arms, chest and back, we're hitting them twice per week. The first session of the week is going to be sort of in the 8 to 12 rep range, even like mostly 8 to 10, a little bit heavier stuff, just straight sets, no intensification techniques or anything like that. But then the second session for the week is actually going to be a lot higher reps, and we're throwing in a lot more like supersets and trisets as well. Basically why we're doing that is to try to take advantage of the theory that muscle basically grows via two pathways. One pathway would be the mechanical stress pathway, so tension driven, where that's like the heavy loading stuff disrupting the muscle fibers. And then the second pathway would be a higher rep stuff and highly fatiguing stuff, which basically encourages muscle growth through the metabolic stress pathway. And that's why things like blood flow restriction training with really low loads can still grow quite significant amounts of muscle mass. So in theory, if we were stimulating muscle growth through both of the anabolic pathways, perhaps we could get greater overall growth in these muscle groups compared to just focusing on sort of one pathway or the other. So that's the layout for today. Today is my metabolic stress day for arms, so I'm going to be using a lot more supersets, even throwing in some trisets, and all of the stuff is in like the 15 rep range, 12 to 15 rep range, so pushing it a little bit higher. So it's going to be a burner. The high rep stuff always burns like a bitch, but the pump should be pretty good. So see you in the gym in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, so workout is complete. It was a really good workout. Pump was phenomenal. We were sort of in and out of the gym in 40 minutes, but yeah, really good training session. Post-workout meal is going down now. Usually post-workout, what I'm having at the moment is 200 grams of steak and 250 grams of rice. So we're at Teo now. This will be around about 250 grams of rice and probably slightly, this is a lot of beef actually now that I look at it. It's probably like maybe even 250 beef. So I'll make the calorie adjustments for that. And then it's just a teriyaki sauce with some onions.
So gonna smash this meal. I'm super hungry, and we'll catch you in the next clip. Alrighty, so post-workout meal is wrapped up. Super good, feeling very satiated, which is nice. That was a ton of beef as well, by the way. Anyway, so considering I am bulking at the moment, trying to put on a bit of muscle, like I said at the start of the video, I wanted to take the time to chat about some of the considerations that you should be having when trying to set up your own muscle gain diet. So I thought I would try to put together just like a mini lecture that sort of sets out a template on how you can set up your own muscle gain diet. So we're going to work through rates of weight gain, how to determine your calorie intake, your macro intake. Should we worry about nutrient timing? How do we monitor progression? So I'm hoping you get some value out of this. Follow along. I hope you learn something. So the first thing that you need to do when setting up a muscle gain diet is decide on your rate of weight gain. So research tells us that the optimal rate of weight gain for maximizing muscle growth and minimizing the fat gain is going to be around 0.2 to 0.5% body weight gains per week. So for an 80 kilo person, that's going to work out to be body weight gains of 160 to 400 grams per week. So how do you decide if you should be closer to the 0.2% per week or closer to the 0.5%? For the 0.5% per week, which is the faster rate of weight gain, this is appropriate for beginners or leaner people. The slower rate of weight gain is obviously more appropriate for advanced lifters, so more years of training under the belt, and people with higher body fat. Obviously, it makes sense that for advanced lifters, they have a more difficult time adding muscle, so it pays to go slow. And when you're at a higher body fat percentage, muscle gain just tends to be a lot less efficient, and you don't want to be taking body fat levels to further unhealthy levels by pushing the weight on too fast. Anything faster than 0.5% per week is just going to risk excessive fat gain. So the next step, once you've worked out your rate of weight gain, is to decide or calculate your calorie intake. So we know that 500 grams of mixed human tissue contains around 3,500 calories of energy. So that works out to be the assumption that for every gram of human tissue, it equals around 7 calories. So under that premise, to build 500 grams of body weight in a week, you're going to need a 3,500 calorie surplus. So it's 3,500 calories above your weight maintenance calorie level. So if we work through an example, for an 80 kilo athlete, let's say that his weight maintenance equals 2,500 calories. So that's how much he needs to eat just to maintain his body weight. He's lean and he's a beginner, so he decides to go with a slightly faster rate of weight gain at 0.5% of body weight per week. That works out to be, for him, a gain on the scale per week of 400 grams. So we go back to our calculation up here, 400 grams to be gained in a week. If each gram contains 7 calories, it's going to mean that our athlete is going to need a calorie surplus of 2,800 kcals, a weekly surplus of 2,800 kcals. So then to work out the daily intake, we take that 2,800 kcal surplus, we divide it by 7 days, and that equals a surplus of 400 kcals per day. Now, that means that because his weight maintenance calories is 2,500 add the 400 calorie surplus means that this athlete needs to eat 2,900 kcals per day to roughly gain 400 grams on the scale per week at 0.5% of his body weight. Our next step is to work out our macros. So we need to work out, once we know how many calories we need to consume, we need to work out where these calories is going to come from. So our first macro is protein. Now we know that the upper effective range for muscle gain is going to be around 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kg of body weight. But you might say, okay, well then why don't we just have more than 2.2? More is not always better, and having protein beyond 2.2, it's not going to increase muscle gain any further, and actually having too much protein intake can potentially take away from your intake of carbohydrates and fats, and that has its own issues, which we'll talk about later on. For simplicity, for most clients, I just recommend 2 grams per kilo of body weight. You usually tend to have really good muscle gain results on that protein intake. So our next step is carbs. Now, yes, protein is sort of what we consider to be the anabolic macro in the sense that it directly stimulates muscle growth, but carbohydrates, they indirectly stimulate muscle growth because they provide the energy or the fuel for the hard workouts that allow us to build muscle. Now, we know that with carbohydrate intake, we store these carbs in the muscle as glycogen. And when glycogen is low, i.e. from low carbohydrate intake, workouts suffer, and muscle protein synthesis, which is the thing that allows our muscles to grow, goes down. So it makes a lot of sense for us to be consuming a good amount of carbohydrates. We also know that carbohydrates support the nervous system, which is why carbohydrates are so good for dissipating fatigue and why we really struggle to recover when carbohydrate intake is quite low. And it also causes insulin release, which is anabolic in itself. So the next question will be how many carbohydrates, or what should our carbohydrate intake be? Generally, I recommend that the optimal intake for most people, by most people I mean pretty reasonably advanced lifters who are training for sort of 1 hour per day, 5 to 6 times per week, trying to build muscle. The optimal intake is usually around 4 grams per kg of body weight. But the caveat to this is that this number will have to be increased or decreased to align with your target rate of weight gain, which should be the most important factor. Our next macro is fats, and our final macro. Now, we know that with fats, there's essential fats needed for survival, and we also know that we need a dietary fat intake to regulate our chemical messengers, which is important for our bodily functions. But the problem with fats is that they're a very poor fuel for workouts. They also don't affect anabolic pathways directly, which makes them basically a less effective macronutrient than carbohydrates for building muscle. And we also know that eating beyond our minimum requirements of dietary fats, so our essential fats, doesn't do much apart from make our diet taste better. So you might say, okay, well then what is the minimum intake of dietary fats that we should be having? Generally, it's around 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, assuming that most of these fats are coming from healthy fat sources. In terms of optimizing the muscle gain process, to build as much muscle as you possibly can, it's likely optimal to target this minimum intake of fat. Having much more fat than this intake, like I said, it's not really going to do anything apart from make your meals and your diet taste a little bit better. There can be issues with adopting the low fat intake for muscle gain, particularly when calories get really, really high, because it can create palatability issues, which means the food doesn't taste that nice, so it's a lot harder to get down, and this can basically threaten your muscle gain phase because you're not getting in the required calories to establish a surplus and to allow you to continue to grow. So our next thing to consider is nutrient timing. When you eat is absolutely not as important as what you eat, but can still provide an edge, 1 to 5%, I would say. So the best muscle gain results happen from 4 to 6 meals per day. How do you know if you should go with 4? How do you know if you should go with 6? I just recommend choosing the meal frequency that suits your preference. Apart from that, having less meals per day, like having 4 meals per day, that can be more appropriate for low calories because you get a little bit more satiety with each meal. But when calories are really, really high, like during muscle gain phases, that's when a higher meal frequency, like 6 meals per day, can be more effective because you're not having to stuff yourself at each meal, or just meaning that if you're having 4 meals per day and you're on 4,000 calories per day or something like that, having 4 1,000 calorie meals can just be really difficult to stomach at each meal sitting. There's also a minor benefit to having carbs around the workout, so your pre, post, and potentially intra-workout phases. And we think this is a good idea because obviously it's providing the fuel that supports high intensity efforts. It also spares muscle glycogen and potentially spare muscle as well. When muscle glycogen gets really low, that's when the body can tend to look at protein for a fuel source. Spare glycogen and muscle. And we want carbohydrates post-workout to replenish that glycogen that we just burnt or used up during the workout. The anabolic window, we probably would have to talk about that in the context of nutrient timing. Anabolic timing. We used to think the anabolic window was really short, like that we had to consume protein and carbs 30 minutes after our workout. That is not the case. The anabolic window, or in other words, when our muscle is extra receptive to protein, lasts a lot longer than we originally thought. So as a general rule, I just recommend consuming carbs and protein within 1 hour each side of training. And that's going to maximize all of your anabolic responses from the training. So pre-workout meal within an hour of training, post-workout meal within an hour after training. Also, as a final nutrient timing tip, avoid fats or high fats and fiber really close to training, because these can basically cause GI distress for some people and have them feeling really bloated and sluggish in the gym. And it can just really slow digestion too much, where we might not actually be having the protein and carbs in the bloodstream, which is actually the goal of our pre and post workout meals. If your fats and fiber are too high, it's just going to slow that transition time from the GI to the blood, which is not what we want. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to monitor progression. It's important to remember that the calories that put on 400 grams in our first week of bulking is not going to put on 400 grams in our 8th week of bulking. So to monitor progression, I recommend weigh-ins at least 3 times per week. And then we take the average. We take the average because with day-to-day weigh-ins, we get fluctuation based on our fiber intake, our sodium intake, our sleep, our hydration status, all things like that. And it can cause the weight to fluctuate even up to 2 kilos between 2 days, depending on what size you are. Now, this can basically make progress quite difficult to monitor if you're only taking for, let's say, 1 weigh-in per week. So we take at least 3. If you can do 7 weigh-ins per week, I recommend that. That's what I do. And take the average, and then you just compare your average body weight week to week and make sure you're staying close to that target weekly gain that you set for yourself. To adjust calories during your muscle gain phase, generally I recommend 5% calorie adjustments. So let's say that you had a target weekly weight gain of 300 to 400 grams, and then this week you only gained 80 grams on your average. So you're not quite gaining fast enough, so that means it's time to adjust calories. And let's assume that you were on 2,900 calories, like our example 80 kilo athlete. 2,900 calories is not getting the job done, clearly, because you're only gained 80 grams for the week. So what you do is you time that 2,900 calories by 5%, 1.05, and that means your new calorie target for next week, to basically bring you back into that target weekly weight gain range, is 3,045 kcals. Alternatively, if you're gaining too fast, let's say your gain range was this, but you gained 800 grams for the week, you might then consider dropping your calories by 5%. So in this case, you would go 2,900 times 0.95. As well as to monitor progress, I recommend photos once per month. Taking more than one per month is probably unnecessary. I don't know what that was. Once per month is probably unnecessary, just because muscle gain is quite a slow process, and you're not going to be able to have visible changes in your muscle size within sort of a couple of weeks or something like that. I also recommend girth measurements around the thighs and the bicep. They tend to be quite resistant to fat gain. So if you're seeing changes, it can be quite indicative that sort of muscle circumference change in these areas. It's quite unnecessary to be sort of taking waist measurements or things like that in a muscle gain phase, because yes, they're going to be going up with the fat gain, but it's not really showing you if you're actually growing muscle, if that makes sense. In terms of time frames for this, I recommend gain for 4 times as long as you cut, if the goal is to maximize your muscle. So an example would be, you might gain for 8 months, and then you follow that up with a 2-month mini cut to clean up the body fat. The reason that we allocate more time to muscle growth or gaining than we do to cutting is because muscle growth happens way slower than fat loss. So obviously the times allocated to each needs to be scaled that way. Another thing to consider just in terms of time frames, because a lot of people, they bitch out of gaining, but gaining long enough. And the reason they do that, the reason they bitch out, is usually because of body image issues. You're going to have to accept that during muscle gain phases, you are going to look softer and smoother than you would like. So that's when it's really important to take an investment mindset. And what I mean by investment mindset is when you're making an investment, let's say you're buying shares in a company, you give that company essentially your money. So you're incurring a cost at that time with the assumption that at a later date, you're going to get that money back plus a return on your investment. So in the context of physique building, yes, you might look worse now, but that's the trade-off you make to look better later. And just to basically highlight this point, I'm gonna put up on the screen now the photos at the end of my last cut. And you can see that like I look absolutely trash. Like I'm pretty fat, soft, bloated, look horrible. I'd have to wear a rashie or a wetsuit down to the beach if I wanted to. But that's a necessary trade-off that you sort of have to make to build muscle. And then if I put that side by side with my cut photos, which were 12 weeks later, you can see that all of a sudden I look much better and have really good muscle shape and tone. I even look like I've gained muscle in the fat loss period when I haven't. I'm 12 kilos lighter in the right photos than I am in the left photos. But to get that end product, to get that improvement in my look, I've had to go through the sucky time of looking soft and eating when I don't really want to, and having an appearance that I'm not particularly proud of. So hopefully, you seeing these photos can help you to I guess when you are in your bulking phases and you're feeling a little bit down because your abs are a little bit blurry and you can see your physique sort of regressing. Hopefully this is enough to just remind yourself that yes, take the cost now for the payout and the return on your investment later on. Alrighty, so by popular demand, I'm going to take you through how I cook my chicken. It's super simple, but for some reason, a lot of you guys seem to think I've got a secret strategy. So we got the chicken titties here. I cook them in an air fryer. So a lot of people hype up the air fryers a lot. They almost sound like a bit of a fad, like keto or something like that. But I'll be the first to say that the air fryer does the job, and it delivers on all its promises. So super simple. Like, the reason I like the air fryer is I hate cooking and I hate cleaning. So the quickest and simplest way that I can get it done is good for me. So the titties just go straight in there like that. There's some juicy ones. They're good off. Right. Lay them in like that. Then to season it, all I use is this Jakkul's kebab seasoning, salt, breadcrumbs, rice flour, and spices. And I'll just douse them pretty heavy in that. It almost makes, like, when it cooks, it almost makes like a little crispy coating. Then I just whip that in, and then I cook it at 200 for 30 minutes. That just does its little thing, and then 30 minutes later, we'll come check on it, and I'll show you what I do next. But yeah, super simple, perfect for the lazy cookers and cleaners like me. So we'll catch this plant back in half an hour. Alrighty, so chicken is done. That's what she looks like. She's still steaming. Pull them out here. Yeah, pretty much cooked perfect. Still juicy in the middle. Just chop it straight into a container. I'll do this roughly twice a week at the moment. But all up, it takes about 45 minutes and I'll get a bunch of meals off this. So it's pretty easy. It's much more efficient. Oh shit. Much more efficient than sort of cooking up each meal as you go, because when you're eating 6 times a day, you don't have to be cooking each meal from scratch. That'll just take an enormous amount of time. So that'll just go into the fridge, and I'll just pull from that as I need it. This will probably get me 10 or so meals, maybe 8 meals, but I'll just take this container and I'll just refrigerate it. I find that cooked chicken, like, people get a little bit worried about it and they freak out keeping chicken in the fridge for too long, but I find that chicken's pretty much good for like 6 or 7 days if you keep it refrigerated. So I'll just take this out as I need it for each meal, and then just microwave it with my rice as I go. So chicken meal prep complete. Finally, we have the unveiling of the famous Jackson Pios protein cake recipe. So this was a discovery that I made, again, out of pure laziness. So I was having protein pancakes as part of my diet. And like, the shit thing about protein pancakes is they take fucking ages to make. And like, you have to, like, you put one on, cook it, put it on the plate, put the next batch on. By the time you're finished, like, the other 3 pancakes that you already cooked are cold, and like maybe just the top one is like slightly warm, and it's taking you like fucking 20 minutes just to prep it. So I had this thought, like, could you just microwave the protein pancakes in one batch at once and then just eat it like a freaking bowl of birthday cake or something like that? So it ended up working really, really well. I put it on my IG story. People thought I was bullshitting, and then they started trying and they're like, holy shit, never having protein pancakes again. We're just gonna do it, the micro cakes. So it's super, super simple recipe. I I claim discovery of it, but it's almost so simple that I feel like I actually haven't really discovered anything. But I think all the greatest inventions happen by accident. So I'll show you how I do mine exactly anyway to get the perfect protein cake. So I use the Kodiak cakes. Now you might say, oh, well, maybe that only just works because you have the Kodiak cakes, but I have tried it with the Bulk Nutrients protein pancakes. It works exactly the same. So it should work with any standard protein pancake mixture. So I do 180 grams of this, which is a fair bit. This one's actually got choc chips in it, so that makes it taste super, super good. I guess maybe if you just had a plain protein pancake mix, you could just chuck a couple of nibbles in there or something like that. Okay, now, basically the water mixture is just ad lib. So you get a, what is this thing called?
Whisk.
Get a whisk. And you pour, don't overdo it. Just go and trial it, mix it. But you can still see that's a little bit too thick. See, like, you want it just so it sort of falls off the whisk. Just a little bit more water. That's almost there. See, that's pretty much perfect. It's just dripping off now. So that is all mixed through. Microwave, I've experimented with the microwave time. I found that the best time to cook it all through is 3 minutes. It's hot. Okay, so here we have the finished protein cake. So just to give you an idea of what we're working with here. Like that is, and if you have a look, the chocolate at the bottom, and that comes through. Whoa. That is like, for the macros, this is like ridiculously good. It honestly feels like you're having a big bowl of cake, but it's got like 50 grams, 45 grams of protein. So that is the secret behind the protein cakes. It's probably my favorite meal that I'm having at the moment, having it every day. The glorious thing about it is not only that it tastes so good and the macros are illegally good, but it's also so easy. Like, I literally just pour it in, mix water, microwave it, and then it's good to go. The only other thing that I will include, just to take it over the edge, is just a bit of the sugar-free maple, and I'll just do a small drizzle on that. So for this bowl, the macros that we're working with here are 8 grams of fat, so super low considering there's chocolate in there. 100 grams of carbs, so pretty high carb, but okay for me in a muscle gain phase. And 44 grams of protein. So that's pretty wild, really, considering how good it tastes. So give this a crack with your protein pancakes. Let's kill protein pancakes. This is the future. So if you do give it a crack, tag me in your stories and let me know how you went. Because from the feedback of people that have tried it, they're saying it's absolutely epic and it's changing their world. So I'm gonna get this down. This is meal 3. I'll catch you guys in the next clip.
Alrighty, next meal is going down. I was supposed to eat the chicken breast that I cooked up in my air fryer, but plans change. Eating out a second time for the day. I'll show what I got here. So we've got a lemongrass chicken with a bit of veg and probably another 250 grams of rice there. So normally I'd have 200 grams of chicken and 250 grams of rice for this meal, but because I'm eating out, I'm going to substitute it for this. So I'll catch you guys in the next clip.
Alrighty, got a meal 5 going down now. Went down to the boxing club and knocked around for about an hour. And now I just showered up and getting in a post-second training meal. So I'll show you what I got. So pretty basic. I got 200 grams of chicken breast, some of that chicken that I cooked up before in the air fryer, and then 250 grams of rice. I just use the microwave 250 gram rice, basically because I'm lazy shit when it comes to prepping food. Long grain rice, despite what your girlfriend might tell you, size does matter. So we only about those long grains in here. So gonna get this meal in while I watch an episode of anime, and then I'm probably gonna knock out. I got a few more client check-ins waiting. Righty, it is 10 p.m. Bit of a late work night for me tonight. I'm just studying up on a bit of research for a podcast that I'm doing tomorrow morning. A very important podcast. I'm being interviewed by Dr. Eric Helms and Omar. I think it's Omar Asif, I think. Sorry, Omar, if I cooked that. But yeah, they co-host the Iron Culture podcast, and we're going to be talking all things intermittent fasting, intermittent dieting, refeeds, diet breaks, and chrononutrition, which is a pretty interesting topic. So just sharpening my tools tonight and making sure that I'm ready to smash it tomorrow during the chat. But have got my last meal going down right now. I'll show you what we got. So it's a casein pudding bowl. So it's just 2 scoops of the casein from Bolt Nutrients, 2 scoops mixed in with a bit of water, and then I've also got 100 grams of raspberries mixed in with that, and then I'll just take a tablespoon of peanut butter to top it off. So that will be my full day of eating on a pretty regular day of bulking, I guess. 4,000 calories, pretty easily done. It's kind of scary how the 4,000 calories goes down so easily, but that is the nature of the game. I've still got a little bit of work to do here. Hopefully get into bed before 11:30 tonight, because due to the time difference, I've got to be live on the podcast at 6:30 a.m. Tomorrow. So got to get my beauty sleep in time for that, so I look nice on camera. As always, thank you for watching the video and tuning in. If you did learn something, if you did like something, please let me know in any way, whether that's a comment, an Instagram story, share, anything. Really, that's all I ask for in return for doing these videos. Like, yes, they do cost money, yes, they do cost time, but as long as I know that people are getting value out of them and enjoying them, that's all I really care about. All right, thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Peace.